Pete Alonso is a guy that is going to be someone who gets a lot of attention this offseason. And you say, well, do you do him instead of Soto? You're Steve Cohen. You probably can do both. Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Fair Territory, the Monday edition, the solo edition. Alana Rizzo is back with us on Thursday. I hope everyone had a great weekend. It was a tremendous weekend of baseball. And I want to start off today talking about what I think is a fascinating storyline that is developing, one that is not necessarily a surprise to those of us who are looking at these teams in spring training and before the season started, but one that seems to be crystallizing in an even firmer way than perhaps before. I'm talking about the National League and the three powers in the National League, in my estimation. The Dodgers, the Phillies, and the Braves, not necessarily in that order. In fact, it's the other order. Braves are 19-7, the Phillies are 19-10, the Dodgers are 18-12. Now, you can tell me that the Cubs and Brewers and Cubs, have better winning percentages than the Dodgers. And yes, the Cubs are off to a very impressive start, especially considering that right now, Cody Bellinger, Seiya Suzuki, and Justin Steele remain on the injured list. I don't even believe people with the Cubs, or Brewers for that matter, would tell you that their team is stronger than the Dodgers. So I'm going to focus on the Dodgers, Phillies, and Braves. What's interesting to me about these teams, against the backdrop of this season, is where they stand with regard to their rotations, and where they will stand as the season evolves and progresses and goes into the postseason, because basically this sport has become a case of last man standing, last pitcher standing. Each of these teams is fairly well situated, but perhaps in the cases of the Dodgers and Braves in particular, not as well situated from a starting pitching standpoint as they would like to be. So let's go through these rotations, where they stand right now, and perhaps pitchers that could join them as the season progresses. I'm not going to get too deeply into the bullpens because, frankly, it all starts with the rotations, and that is where I think this thing ultimately will be decided. So let's start with the team that, as right now, the best rotation in the National League. I'm talking about the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies rotation, due to the emergence of Ranger Suarez in particular, has become that much more of a force. And we have to mention as well Spencer Turnbull and his early contributions. He has now been replaced by Taijuan Walker. You see the group right there: Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, Taijuan Walker, and currently Christopher Sanchez. Spencer Turnbull is on the list of further possibilities because, of course, he can return to the rotation at any time. And then I list some other names: Mick Abel, Colby Allard, Tyler Phillips, Max Castillo. Mick Abel is the most intriguing of those. He's a top prospect. He's a guy that they may be counting on as the season progresses. Again, the Phillies are second in rotation ERA in the major leagues, only to the Red Sox. The Red Sox, remarkable rotation so far. So I like the Phillies. I like where they stand. I like that Wheeler and Nola are postseason veterans. They're accustomed to doing what they've done in October. And I really like what I've seen from Ranger Suarez, of course, that brilliant scoreless inning streak. He is looking like an all-star. Now, let's continue on. Let's look at the next team on this list. That would be the Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves, their rotation without Spencer Strider has still been quite strong of late. I'm talking about Max Fried, Chris Sale, tremendous start to his season. Reynaldo Lopez, one of the biggest surprises of the season with his move to the rotation and success in that role. Charlie Morton, ageless, and Bryce Elder stepping in nicely at this point for Strider. Now, the Braves have some other possibilities too, some younger pitchers: A.J. Smith-Shawver, Darius Vines, Dylan Dodd, and Ian Anderson, who is coming back from Tommy John surgery, could be a factor at some point. It's an okay group. It's not the group that it would be with Strider, and there are going to be questions as the season progresses with regards to innings restrictions, with Lopez in particular, because of course he was a reliever the last few years, and even with Chris Sale. We'll see if he holds up. So that's the Atlanta Braves. Now, finally, I want to look at the Dodgers as well. The Los Angeles Dodgers, a team that we all regard as a super team, but a team that even when we were talking about them in the spring as this potentially dynamic force, had some rotation questions. And you look at where they are right now. Glasnow, tremendous start. Yamamoto, shown flashes of really being the pitcher that they paid $325 million for. I believe he will get better as the season goes on. And then you're looking at James Paxton, Gavin Stone, and Landon Knack. Why? Because Bobby Miller is on the IL, Emmett Sheehan is on the IL. They are still waiting for Walker Buehler, whose rehab assignment has not gone all that great coming back from Tommy John surgery. He's healthy, but he hasn't pitched all that well, at least in terms of the numbers. And then Clayton Kershaw, a question, a possibility perhaps for the second half. So which of these teams do you like? Which of these teams do you think will be the best going forward? Which of these teams perhaps will stumble if indeed their injury situations get worse? All of these clubs are basically one or two injuries away in their rotation from having real problems. So is every team in the major leagues. And I guess the other question would be, is there another team in the National League that perhaps can slip in as the Diamondbacks did last year, as the Padres did 2 years ago, and surprise us all in October? Can't rule it out. Certainly can't rule it out with all that we've seen with the expanded playoffs and the possibility of upsets, particularly in that division series round. Teams are coming off the bye. I don't buy the excuse, but it has been an issue. There's one other element here. There's one other thing I want to discuss as we look at these teams, as we look at the landscape of the National League. Obviously, the trade deadline presents a possibility for all of the clubs I mentioned, as well as other clubs, to improve their starting rotations. The question there is, which players, which pitchers are going to be available? Which starting pitchers are going to be out there? As of right now, we're not even in May, I couldn't tell you. If you look back a year ago at this time, no one would have predicted that Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer would become available. So perhaps we get the same kind of a scenario this season with a team that proves a disappointment. Maybe that team is the Astros. We've talked a lot about them. And yeah, they swept the Rockies in Mexico City over the weekend. Congratulations, guys. That's not what we're going to judge them on. So the deadline is a possibility for these teams to get better, but I'm not sure that it's going to be such a great crop. A couple of reasons for that. Injuries are one, of course. A lot of pitchers who might be available won't be available. And then there is the case of the expanded playoffs and what we've seen in the last couple of years as more teams try to compete. Perhaps the anti-tanking measures are taking effect in that regard, but I really believe that more teams are seeing possibilities. I'm talking about teams like the Royals and the Tigers that have spent money, that are really trying again. There aren't many teams that are simply going to be out of contention by July 31st. The Rockies, yeah. The Marlins, yeah. The Angels, sure. But those teams don't really have great starting pitching to trade in the first place. The Marlins had one, Jesus Luzardo. Now he's on the injured list. Perhaps he'll be back, but we'll see about that. So, as the season evolves, all of these questions will begin to be answered. It's going to be a fascinating National League race right down to the end. And yes, I'm not going to rule out the Cubs getting in there in some fashion. Maybe they're the team that improves the deadline. The Brewers, to me, have too many pitching questions to hold up, and I don't see any other team really, maybe the Diamondbacks, finally emerging if their pitching gets healthy as the type of team that could be in this mix, but I do question their offense a bit. So, I'm looking right now at the Phillies, the Braves, and the Dodgers. The Dodgers, the Braves, and the Phillies. You might see it differently, but we'll see how the season turns out. Time now for the Inside Dish, the part of the show where I go inside a story I've written, inside a trend in the game. And this week I want to talk about something we discussed on the Fox broadcast Saturday after Pete Alonso became a member of the 200 Homer Club. Hit his 200th homer as a Met in a losing effort, but still it's quite an accomplishment for Alonso to get to 200. And of course, we all know Pete Alonso is in his last year of club control with the Mets. He is a free agent at the end of the season. And his particular free agent case is going to be one of the more interesting ones in years. Now, every free agent case is interesting. Juan Soto is going to be interesting. Alex Bregman, too. But Alonso is sort of a test case for where the sport, where the industry views first baseman. Because if you go back 10, 15 years ago, first basemen were paid a lot better than they are today. The elite first basemen, the guys who signed long-term contracts. And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about because 10, 15 years ago, look at these numbers for first baseman. Mark Teixeira, 8 years, $180 million as a free agent. Albert Pujols, legendary contract, 10 years, $240 million. Prince Fielder, he got this deal because Victor Martinez got hurt, and the late Tigers owner Mike Ilitch said, "You know what? I'll give Prince Fielder $214 million over 9 years." It happened over a span of days. And then 2 extensions that were also monster deals. Joey Votto, 10 years, $225 million. Miguel Cabrera, 8 years, $248 million. Back in that time, from 2009 to 2014, people in the industry were not as concerned as they are today with where first base lies on the defensive spectrum. How the defensive value of those players isn't as important, isn't as significant as it is at other positions. And yes, with the rise of analytics, we've since come to understand that a little bit better. So that is why first basemen are not valued necessarily the way they once were, and certainly aging players are not valued the way they once were. And some of those players that were just on that list were getting into their 30s at the time they received those deals. Let's look at 3 contracts that are more indicative of where the industry lies right now, of where executives kind of view first baseman. All right, Paul Goldschmidt, March 2019, 5 years, $130 million extension. These 2 contracts, the next 2, came within days of each other. Freddie Freeman, the 6-year, $162 million free agent deal with the Dodgers, and then Matt Olson, who the Braves acquired to replace Freeman, an 8-year, $168 million extension. That's not 200, those numbers, not 248 like Miguel Cabrera got. So there's a difference. And here comes Pete Alonso, maybe the next great first baseman to be considered in this category. So what's going to happen with Alonso? Well, there are so many layers to this. One, he is represented by Scott Boras. Scott Boras also represents Juan Soto, who is going to be a member of next year's free agent class, and Alex Bregman, who is going to be a member of next year's free agent class. Now, the Mets might very well be interested in Soto in particular, and even Bregman, depending on where Brett Baty ends up this year. He looks like he's going to be a pretty good player still, and maybe they'll feel comfortable with him going forward at third base. Maybe they won't. So what do the Mets prioritize? Well, as I said on the broadcast on Saturday, I believe Alonso should be a Met. He has more value to the Mets than he does to other teams. Why? Because he has proven he can play in New York. He is someone the team drafted and developed. He's a homegrown player. And he also now, having reached 200 homers, has a certain place in this team's history. A place that is growing even more prominent as the years pass. And let's look at the list of Mets players who have reached 200 homers in their career. It's not a very long list. Strawberry at 252, Wright at 242, Piazza at 220, Pete Alonso at 200. So Pete is probably, 2 years away from passing Strawberry. He could do that. He could be the all-time Mets home run leader if he re-signs. And also, he is progressing as a home run hitter at a rapid pace. I want to look at another list here. Fastest hitters to 200 homers. Ryan Howard did it in 658 games. Aaron Judge in 671. Ralph Kiner, former Mets announcer, great Pittsburgh Pirate, 707 games. And Alonso, 200 homers in 710. So he has been a preeminent power hitter from the earliest stages of his career. The Mets people will tell you he also is a really good hitter. He's someone who focuses on the craft of hitting. So where this all goes, I'm not sure. David Stearns, the Mets president of baseball operations, is certainly one of the modern GMs who I would assume does not love the idea of extending a first baseman in his 30s into his late 30s. But at the same time, this player has great value to the Mets, just as Aaron Judge had great value to the New York Yankees. Now, I'm not suggesting Alonso is Judge. No one would do that. But Alonso is handling the pressure of his free agency in New York rather well. He's had pretty good start so far to his season. And he is a guy, again, that the Mets can count on if they sign him going forward. Is he a great defender? No. He works hard at his defense, though, and he certainly is an average defender who may ultimately be considered above average. So I don't know, again, where this goes. I'll repeat myself in that regard. But Pete Alonso is a guy that is going to be someone who gets a lot of attention this offseason, but I don't know that any team really needs him more than the New York Mets do. And you say, well, do you do him instead of Soto? You're Steve Cohen. You probably can do both. The Mets payroll is going to become a lot more flexible after this season. I don't know if it's wise necessarily to have Soto at, say, 500 million, Lindor at 340, and then Alonso at 200 plus, if that's what it's going to take. But at the same time, the Mets certainly have not hesitated in their recent past under Cohen to spend big dollars. And again, of all the free agents this offseason, to me, Alonso might be the most interesting one of all because of what he represents in terms of his position and in terms of where that position is evaluated and celebrated, I guess you could say, by the industry as a whole. Time now for Grillin Ken. Let's get to your questions. The first question comes from Kevin Lyon, who asks, Reynaldo Lopez, best signing of the offseason economically speaking? Great question, Kevin. Now, we're only talking about 1 month into, in most cases, what are multi-year contracts. But Reynaldo Lopez certainly is one of the best contracts, economically speaking. But I want to take a look at some others that are really interesting as well. A number of starting pitchers are off to great starts. I'm talking about free agent starting pitchers from last offseason. Reynaldo Lopez, foremost among them. 3 years, $30 million was his contract. He has a 0.72 ERA in 4 starts. But I'm not sure he's better than Shota Imanaga, 4 years, $53 million, 0.98 in 5 starts. And I'm going to give honorable mention to some other guys as well. Sonny Gray, he got a lot of money. 3 years, $75 million, 1.16 ERA in 4 starts, everything the Cardinals could have wanted. Jordan Hicks, one of the better stories of the season so far, 4 years, $44 million, moving from the bullpen to the rotation, 1.59 ERA in 6 starts. Lugo, another former reliever, like Lopez, like Hicks, but became a starter last year. 3 years, $45 million, 1.66 ERA in 6 starts. So, okay, these are some impressive numbers so far. And from the hitting side, I would go with Justin Turner, who's got like an 860 OPS on a 1-year, $13 million deal. I don't know that we can judge which pitcher or which player is the best signing so far, but it's intriguing to me that all of these guys that we just had on that list have performed so well, and that Hicks and Lopez have done it moving from the bullpen to the rotation. Now, the question becomes for both those guys in particular, how many innings will they be capable of going this year? But hey, so far so good. Congratulations to those pitchers and those teams on those signings. The next question comes from DRFU, who asks, as a concerned Blue Jays fan, should we just blow it up and start over? Well, I'm going to give a similar answer to the previous question, at least in terms of where we are in the context of the season. It is still relatively early. We're a month in. The Blue Jays, the team I called Paper Tigers at the end of last season, are again not performing to expectations. They have the pitching, we know that. Their offense has not been as dynamic as one might think. Now, blowing it up is a harsh thing to do. They've invested a lot in this season. They want to be good, and it's too early to determine that they're not going to be a playoff type team. But they are below 500. They just lost 5 of 6 to the Royals and admittedly the Dodgers. So there are going to be questions asked about this team until they prove they are worthy of being looked at as a strong type of team. Now, blowing it up, really what we're asking is, should they trade Guerrero and Bichette? Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette. Both are in situations contractually where they have this year under club control and then next year as well. So 2 years before they become free agents. And I would think if the Blue Jays are out of it somehow by the deadline, they're going to have to look at that at the very least, because they've yet to sign either of those players to an extension. I'm not so sure in Guerrero's case they're so enthused about it right now because he has not been the same guy that he was a few years back. But let's wait and see before we start talking about the Blue Jays really blowing it up and trading those guys. Let's wait and see more of the season, see if this team plays to the level of its talent. That's all we're asking here. Play to the level of your talent. We'll stop calling you ugly names like paper tigers. Finally, we hear from Trent, the real Trent, who asks, is it time to plan the Guardians World Series parade? Well, I talked about the National League in the opening segment, Trent. I did not talk about the American League. We'll get to them at some other point. The Guardians are one of the great stories of this early season. They lost Shane Bieber to Tommy John surgery. They've been without Gavin Williams, who as a rookie last season was really impressive. And they're a team that last year had an offense that kind of put everyone to sleep. It was a pop gun type of deal, right? Not much power. Well, suddenly they're one of the top hitting teams in the major leagues. And they are a team that, while they lost the series to the Braves this weekend, no shame in that, have emerged as perhaps more of a force than we thought. Now, I've got questions about their pitching. We're now seeing Tanner Bybee perform like he did last year, but the depth of their rotation is going to be something that they're going to have to deal with the entire season because they've lost Bieber and we don't know where Williams is just yet. They have some other options, some other possibilities, some other guys that they like in there, but that's one question. And the other question is, will they hit like this all year? They have Jose Ramirez, one of the top players in the game, one of the most underrated players in the game. They have Josh Naylor, who in the early part of this season has looked like he has reached another level, a guy who is becoming a star. So I love what the Guardians are doing. I love their bullpen. It's been outstanding so far with Clase at the back. I just don't know if their pitching will hold. If it does hold, if they can somehow find some solutions, I don't know about planning the World Series parade, but certainly are they a potential playoff team in the AL Central? Yes, but the Royals and Tigers are better too. The Twins finally are starting to play to their level of talent, so we'll see how this all plays out. I don't know that the White Sox are going to be in the mix. Thanks to everyone for their questions. Thanks for watching, for listening. You know where to find us: YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Like us, subscribe to us, and join us Thursday for our second show of the week. That one will be co-hosted by Alana Rizzo.
The first bet $1,500 offer is on. Download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android or visit BetMGM.com. Sign up and deposit at least $10 into your new account. Place your first wager and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets. If the bet loses, got to use the bonus code FOUL, F-O-U-L. And if that bet does lose, your bonus bets will be available once your initial wager is settled. Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Fair Territory airs each week, and we'd love for you to become part of our community. Here's another video you might enjoy. See you next time.